Hi, friends. Welcome to the pod. All right, I have lots to talk about today. I'm gonna give you guys a little update on just kind of what has been going on in the last week or so and the realizations that I've had because I feel like they're pretty powerful and I feel like it's important to share them. But the purpose of the podcast today is to talk about relationship patterns and trauma bonding and what some people like to call the twin flame journey. And so I'm going to dive really deep into my relationship patterns and share my side of my relationship and yeah, I hope it resonates. I'm sure there's going to be lots of people that it resonates with. So, yeah, this last week has been I've noticed like a really big shift in myself. Like the last few months, I want to say things have been really changing for me on the inside. And I think it has a lot to do with a couple of things. One of them being a shift in perspective, and another one of those things being my level of discipline in my practices that have been nurturing and nourishing my peace and my nervous system. So, a few months ago, I started really getting back into my Reiki practice, my self Reiki, doing self Reiki every single day. It's not a lot, it's like 5 minutes a day. But I just started thinking to myself because I wanted to start teaching Reiki. I was like, well, I better deepen my Reiki practice and become more embodied in my Reiki practice. So I started doing my self Reiki every single day. And it's like 5 minutes. But I noticed that as I started to do this self Reiki every day, I started embodying this deeper level of like safety in my nervous system. And then a couple of months ago, I decided to add in a meditation practice. And so I've been really diligently doing both of those things every day. And then almost every day, I take a walk as well. There's the odd time where I don't. But this morning practice has become what anchors me into groundedness and has given me this sense of self-trust and dedication to myself that I've never really embodied. Like I've gone through periods in my life where maybe I've meditated for this long or like I've been dedicated to certain things, but there's something different about it this time. And it's the fact that I know that I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep going. That's really changing things for me. And probably just because of like where I'm at in my life. I'm in the past, when I would develop these habits, I would fall off from them because my life was so chaotic. There was a lot more drinking in my life and, probably like hangovers on the weekends sometimes and just so much more busyness. And my life is just so much slower now and so much less chaotic that it leaves so much space for me to be dedicated to myself and the practices that make me feel good. And I've really noticed like such a huge change in who I am as a person and just my whole energy and who I am when I show up. Like I just feel softer and I feel this new level of peace that I have never experienced before in my life. And with that peace, I have found myself having so much more space and capacity to add more of the things that I want to do and the things that I love into my life. So I talked a little bit last week about how I really had a hard time making the decision to stop my live workshops. And I feel now that I'm finally have some space from that. I can see how useful that phase of my life was in stretching me and stretching my capacity to hold space for groups and building that self-trust with myself that I know I can stand up and speak in front of people and be uncomfortable and also be okay. But then also honoring that my body needed to step away and take a break, and trusting that that space was going to be leading me into whatever this next phase of my business is. And I'm still not fully certain on where that is, but I'm trusting the process that I'm walking in now. I feel like I have so much more space to create on the back end of my business, to create meditations and healing and courses and all the things that I really want to pour into that I didn't have the space to do before. And to also like for instance, I created this meditation, this somatic journey on creating self-trust. And just after doing it a couple of times, I'm noticing a huge shift in myself, and I probably will be sharing it with the public soon. I just really wanted to try it out and embody it myself before I share it with other people, and so that I can share my transformation with it. Uh, and truly experiment with it. Over this last week, I've really been looking at my patterns with money as I noticed myself slipping into some of my old patterns, but this time noticing and saying to myself, like, what's going on here? Like, why am I starting to slip back into these old patterns? And I know I'm not the same version of myself that I was back then, but I went into the records, and I love doing this. This is my favorite thing to do. Is I used to go into the Akashic records and I used to ask like specific questions. And sometimes the answers would just flow and sometimes they wouldn't. More than often, I would almost feel like kind of stuck in them. And if you guys don't know what the Akashic records are, they are your soul's records of everything that has ever happened to your soul and everything that will ever happen to your soul. And they are just so insightful and amazing to connect with. And that's something I've been doing for a couple years now. And I feel like I've finally found my groove. And it's so interesting to me because I can never sit here and tell you that, like, this is the way that you need to do it, but I can share my story and then you can try that for yourself and see if it works for you, right? Just like when I was taught to read the Akashic Records, I was taught to do it in this certain way. And now that I figured out this new way to do it, it works so much better for me. And so what I do is I open the records and then I sit and I journal and I write about what's on my heart, because usually when I'm going into the records, I'm feeling a little bit stuck or I'm feeling a little bit frustrated and I'm feeling like I need guidance or answers. And so instead of just asking one question, I go in and I share what's on my heart. And then once I get it all out, I start to receive all of the guidance and the answers that I need. And so I was looking at my patterns with money, and I realized that everything in my life was pointing towards this this one thing. And it was this lack of self-trust that I had in myself. And I think that when you are in relationships with people who do not treat you well and you choose to stay, you lose your trust in yourself. And then not only that, but quitting a career where I had a steady income to going out on my own and having to build this self trust kind of from the ground up, from a place of feeling a little bit battered from the pain that I went through in my relationship. So it's like I'm starting from ground zero of building this self-trust. And I noticed myself investing in things and people and mentors that I felt like were going to buy me success. Like if I invested in this course or in this masterclass or in this mentor, that they were gonna guarantee that I would start making more money in my business and my business would start to grow even more and be more successful. And I had a realization because I had somebody in my DMs and she was wanting me to invest in her as a coach. And I was remember thinking to myself, like, I don't want to work with anyone else until I figure out whatever this thing I have, whatever this thing is that I have that's going on inside that I can't quite put my finger on yet. And it was that I didn't have the belief and didn't have the trust in myself that I was going to be capable of not needing to learn more and not needing to be guided to be successful. And I really didn't think that I was somebody who got caught in the trap of like, I need another certification or I need another modality in order to make money. But it happened somehow. And I realized that I was investing in all of these things to further my education, which is amazing. And I always think that we should further our education. But I wasn't doing it from a place of abundance. I was doing it from a place of lack. I was doing it from a place of like, okay, if I add this to my practice, it's going to make me more well-rounded and then I'll be able to help more people and all this stuff. And while in theory, some of that might be true, the reality is that I don't need anything other than the education that I already have in order to help people. Like I just have to double down on what I'm already doing and invest in myself with the expertise and the skills that I already have because they are so powerful and so potent. But it's like this lack mentality of like, I don't have enough. I don't know enough. You do. I do know enough and I do have enough. It's so sneaky. That's the beautiful thing about money and about business is that it's such a mirror to show you the places that you are struggling because I don't just struggle with self-trust in my business. I struggle with self-trust in my personal life. And so I'm building the self-trust in one area and then it also transfers over to this other area, which is really amazing. So I wanted to share that because we do that a lot. We reach out for other people to save us or to guide us or to tell us the answers that only we can answer. I'm the only one who truly knows what will make me be the most successful business owner. There's nothing that anyone like, yes, of course, there's going to be teachers along the way that are going to help you. But the thing is like, it's so easy to copy what other people are doing. And it takes so much time spent reflecting and time spent by yourself to truly filter through all of the noise of what everybody else is doing and to know what it is that you actually want and the way you want to do it and the end goals that you want, the things that you actually desire. And sometimes that requires going down the quote unquote wrong path and discovering that that's actually not for you. And this is for me. I don't ever think that, we can really make a wrong choice because I think that when it feels like we make the wrong choice, it's to lead us to a deeper realization or a deeper lesson on what we needed to know in order to get to where we're going. But I just wanted to share that because that's kind of what I've been realizing and going through over the last week. And I know that there's a lot in the patterns, a lot to be learned from the way that we spend our money and the way that we feel when we spend money and the thing or the feeling that we are trying to get by spending this money. So that's a little food for thought for you, a little reflection later. If you have money patterns that are maybe not serving you, is to look at how you feel when you spend that money. And so anyways, I wanted to dive kind of really deep into my relationship my last couple of relationships, I want to say, and like the patterns that I've had with men over the course of my entire life. I think there's a lot of shame involved for us when we choose these partners that hurt us and we stay in these relationships that are so painful to us. And we see the judgment, coming from other people that just absolutely crushes us because we already feel that self-judgment inside. And there's so many reasons why we will stay with people that are not good for us and not healthy for us. And I want to share with you guys some of the patterns and some of the things that I noticed about myself. And when I got out of my last relationship, like 2 relationships ago, I was with a man who was very narcissistic. He was kind of a sociopath, to be honest. Uh, he even admitted that. And it was very much a relationship that, like, where at the beginning, he really chose me. He kind of love bombed me, and he made me feel so special. And I'd never had any man, I want to say, in like my adult life ever make me feel chosen like that. And it was so intoxicating and it made me feel so special. And after, I want to say, like a few months after he kind of had me hooked, he shifted. Something inside of him changed and he started to become angry and he started to become controlling. And there was this one thing that I always really noticed. He would always push me to go and do my own thing when I would feel like he didn't want to spend time with me or he wasn't prioritizing spending time with me. And I felt that feeling of like almost like desperation, like grappling, like wanting to pull him in closer. And he would push back and just kind of give me resistance. And he would always say, like, go be independent, go do your own thing, like go hang out with your friends. And every time I would hang out with my friends, he would always guilt me. He'd always be like, are you drinking? When are you coming home? And he would always like, it was always this like guilt trip. So it's like I would go out and do what he was pushing me to do, but then he would guilt me for it. And so there was sort of this like whiplash feeling, and it was like just made me feel so powerless and so confused. And I didn't really have the awareness that I do now. Like it's so easy to see when you look back on it, but he obviously did not know what he wanted and he was in his own wounding. But what this did was like this constant feeling of wanting to be wanted, like feeling wanted at the beginning and then that being taken away and then trying to reach for that desire, like to be wanted. I so badly wanted to be wanted. And when we split up, he decided he was going to leave because he didn't want to live here anymore. He wanted to move away. And I couldn't because I had a daughter and her dad lives in town and I couldn't move away. It wasn't an option for me. And I just remember feeling just so crushed and so devastated that somebody who said they loved me could leave and walk away just like that. And it was probably it was it was a really hard time in my life. We spent 8 months together after he told me he was going to leave. And I just was absolutely devastated and I just felt so heartbroken. And when this man came into my life, like not only did he choose me, but he took care of me. Like he cooked, he cleaned, he fixed everything. He was such a go-getter. Like he would fix anything. He was always doing things for me. And so I felt so taken care of. And for the first time since, being a mom, I felt so supported. He helps me with my daughter a lot. He taught her to tie her shoes, to ride her bike. And I just felt so supported. So when I was losing him, I felt just so devastated. I finally got this taste of what it felt like to be supported, and now I was going to be alone again. And not only that, but I felt just so crushed. Like I felt like I was disposable, that this man could just walk away because he wanted to live somewhere else. Because to me, I was like, if you truly love someone, then isn't that enough? And so over the next, I want to say like 2 or 3 years while I was single, I was still entangled with him. It was still this push-pull of emotions and me trying to break free, and I think him trying to control me and to be in control of me because that felt good for him. And I just remember feeling like I was just so focused on how hard life was by myself. And my daughter was going through puberty at the time, and she was so emotional, and I just was so depleted. I was working as a plumber in those days, working full time, like full time and more than full time, working overtime and all this stuff. And I just was just done. I had bought my house at this point, which had stretched me so financially thin. I was just so burnt out. I was so depleted. I was so heartbroken. I had so much anxiety. I was so depressed, so unhappy. And I was so focused on how unhappy I was. And I dated for probably those whole 3 years. Like, I used to be such a serial dater. I was always, if I wasn't with someone, even in my single days, I was always looking for the next thing because I didn't know how to be alone. Alone was so uncomfortable for me and so scary. And I just had this deep void inside of me that I didn't know how to fill. And so I would use love to try to fill this void because I felt like love was going to fill that for me. And so over the course of the next few years while I was single, met so many men and just really struggled to find somebody that I had a connection with. And so when I met my next partner, I felt like I finally found somebody that I had chemistry with. And I saw lots of red flags, but I also had this feeling like, well, I never meet people that I have chemistry with. So like, I'm just going to try and like see where this goes. Like, maybe it won't be as bad as I thought. And he was so open and seemingly willing to like grow and to like evolve as a couple and all this stuff. So that was really that it's like he knew all the things to say to pull me in, and it worked. And if I look back now, like if I met that same person today, I would never start a relationship with him because I never learned how to be happy by myself. I was almost like desperate to dive into a relationship with somebody because that meant that I would feel better and I could be happy again and all this stuff. Whereas now, as I'm single and I take this space for myself without looking for anyone, without trying to meet anyone, without trying to date, it feels so different because I know that I have created or I am creating this life for myself that feels full, that feels fulfilling, that I don't need somebody else to make me happy anymore. I don't need anyone to save me. I saved me. But back then, I was so focused on what I didn't have. I was so focused on feeling like I needed the support of somebody else. And I was just so heartbroken after this man had walked away from me and just kind of left me. And I felt that finally I was being chosen again. And again, similar situation, very intense, a lot of chemistry, deeply falling in love very quickly right off the bat, which I think in itself is such a red flag. Also, two very similar things with my last two relationships that were not healthy was as soon as we met and had our first date, we were like inseparable after. Same thing happened with this last relationship. There was like some other stuff that happened that maybe I'll get into another time, but uh inseparable. And when I look back now, it's like you completely lose your sovereignty and your autonomy when you dive in head first like that. And when you dive in head first like that, you get so entangled in this love and this attachment and this connection that when things do start to turn or when you start to see more red flags emerging, you're almost so entangled now and so in love and so attached and so reliant on this other person that it becomes that much harder to walk away. And so you double down and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to make this work. Like, I'm already committed to this person. So, like, I'm going to give it my everything. And then at some point, you find yourself years later just questioning how you got here in the first place. And then it becomes that much harder to walk away because now your lives are entangled, you live together, all this stuff. But something I didn't realize either, like looking back, is that the more relationships I was in that hurt me, and then the more I continued to look for love as something to like fill the void for myself, the more and more painful that my relationships became. And it's like you can have this childhood that, like, yes, I had trauma in my childhood. Lots of people have had much worse. And I'm not saying that to discount myself, but like when I look at my 20s and into my 30s, how traumatic and difficult my life was way worse than the way that my childhood was. Like, yes, I grew up with crippling anxiety, but the circumstances in my life weren't as painful as they became when my issues kind of were left unchecked. So it's like over time, the little traumas and the big traumas, whatever, they start to compound. And then you unconsciously choose experiences and relationships from your wounding in an attempt to have a different outcome, because the subconscious will do that. Subconscious will say, this situation feels familiar to what I felt in the past, but I want to have a different ending. So I'm going to choose this in hopes that I'll have a different ending. But when we choose like that from an unconscious place, when the end goal of what it is we're seeking is to be loved, and we're not even actually aware of that, what happens is we choose people that are never going to be able to give us that. And so sometimes when you don't even have a childhood that was seemingly that bad, but maybe you had a parent that was emotionally neglectful or highly critical or whatever, you will choose, like I said, those experiences or partners that are going to mirror those experiences back to you later in your life to give you an opportunity again to heal. But when we aren't able to see that these things are being reflected back to us as an opportunity to heal, we allow ourselves to be a victim of these, toxic men, and we just kind of make it about them, and we say like, oh, they're so shitty and I'm absolutely crushed and hurt by them, but we're not seeing our own patterns in choosing them. And it's not until we can start to see our own patterns in choosing these people and the reasons that we're choosing these people that we can truly start to heal. And often we will have very similar themes in multiple areas of our lives. For instance, money and love are often very connected. And money to me I was always so scared that it was going to run out. And so I would like hold on to it, and I didn't want to spend it, and I would feel guilty when I spent it. And I realized the connection between that and love for me. It was so hard for me to let go of these men in my life because I felt like if I let go, I was never going to experience that love again. So even though it wasn't healthy, the good parts felt so good that I didn't want to let go of them. When I started to see this pattern, I was able to recognize that I was playing a huge part in holding on and dragging out these relationships because of my lack of ability to let go. And so that was empowering for me to realize that, okay, I'm holding on because I'm scared that I'm never going to have this love again. Well, I can sit there and tell myself, like, okay, like there is more healthy love coming for you. And although I might not necessarily truly embody it and believe it in that moment, I can now consciously shift my perspective and shift my thoughts and shift the way that I'm moving and the way that I'm going. right? I can consciously create, I can consciously choose what I want my future to look like. And then I can also, you know that there's so many different reasons that we choose these partners and we choose these situations. But one of the biggest ones is that we never experienced being truly loved, or we never felt like we were truly loved by our parents or accepted by our parents. And so we look for other people to find that love and that acceptance. But until we can truly learn to find that love and that acceptance and that worthiness in ourselves, we'll continue to choose partners who reflect back that unworthiness. And I know that like the things like self-love and worthiness and all that, like it always feels so vague. It feels like, okay, those are things I want and I desire to have, but how the fuck do I get there? Like, how do I start finding more worthiness? How do I start loving myself more? And honestly, I think the journey is always going to be different for everybody. But to me, it's like the small little things that we do for ourselves that start to build and start to like snowball and gain momentum. Like if I think back to when I started this journey with like self-love and boundaries and worthiness, really on a deeper level, I I realized that not only is it the little steps, but it's also a choice. I can choose to love myself. I can make the choice that I am going to find a deeper level of worthiness and find a deeper level of self-love. And that just by deciding that, it will naturally start to come to me. Everything that you state that you want, it's on its way to you. It's only a matter of time. But it was like showing up in the little moments, because when you don't have worthiness and you don't have that level of self-love, it feels really hard to like set boundaries and to make those choices. And I think that we have to like make these big changes and, like set huge boundaries for ourselves, like right off the bat. But even with as much work that I've done on myself, I still have tons of moments where people say things to me and later on I'm like, oh, I wish I would have responded to that differently. And instead of beating myself up and being like, oh, like I can't believe I didn't speak up for myself again, I can't believe I didn't set a boundary, knowing that these things take a lot of time, but knowing that if you do continue to show up and you do continue to take those little steps, the bigger changes and the bigger shifts will start to happen naturally. Like, for instance, just ask yourself, like, what are some little things that I can do to choose myself? What are some things that I can do to put myself first? What does self-love feel like to me? Like, what is the version of me who loves herself do? And allow yourself to explore, even things that you want to do that feel uncomfortable. Just start by writing them down. Maybe you're too scared to do them now, but you will get there at some point. I recorded a reel this morning and it was like, if I look back at my life a year ago from today, my life looks so, so fucking different. But when I look back at my business a year ago, yes, it looks different, but I had hoped that I would be way further ahead than I am right now. But when I think about it from this perspective, that my whole personal life had to change in order to support where I'm going in my business. And those are not things that you can rush. But when you look at it from this way of like, okay, like I want to change my life, I want these things, And sometimes those things that we want take a while to get here, but all these other little things in your life have to shift and have to change in order for you to be able to support your dreams and what you desire. Like I said, as soon as you state you want something, it is on its way to you. The dominoes have to fall, and they have to fall in the order that they need to fall. So in those moments when you get discouraged and you feel like all the work that you're putting in isn't amounting to what you want, just remember that your dreams are an accumulation of all those little steps that you take. And that's where it comes back to like self-trust for me. Trust that this path that you're walking on is the one that you're meant to walk on. Trust that the thread that is pulling you in the direction that you are going is pulling you for a reason. You know, when you have this feeling inside of you that you are meant for something more, you're not going to get pulled off on this wild goose chase. Like, the reason that you feel that feeling inside of you is because that reality is meant for you. And when there's such a big gap between where we are and what we really want, it can be so easy to think that we're delusional or to get scared that maybe that's not actually meant for us. Like, maybe we're crazy for wanting better for us, but you're not crazy. The desire that you feel inside of you is the thread that pulls you to where you're meant to go. Keep having faith that you will be shown the steps as you go, and trust that as you move through, it's going to feel scary. It's going to feel weird, because when you move away from a life that is all you've ever known, it's all your family has ever known, you are now entering into the unknown. And that's always going to be scary because the nervous system craves that safety. And that's why it's so important, I think, to have some sort of practice that keeps you anchored into safety as your life changes and as your life shifts. And for me, that's my meditation, that's my self-Reiki, that's my walks. As my life changes and as I grow and as I step deeper into the unknown, I continue to show up for myself in ways that are predictable, and that creates safety in my nervous system. I got off really far on a tangent that it not really directly related to relationships, but there was some things I wanted to share too about like why it's so hard to leave a relationship even when you know better, even when you know you need to leave. And I actually went to this workshop like over a year ago at Wild Rose in Alberta here. And this woman was talking about how you have to kind of, when you make a decision in your mind, like when you make a decision, it's like, okay, I have to leave. You now have to go through this whole process of preparing to leave. And sometimes that process can take years. And for me, it really came down to nervous system capacity. When I was, with my ex partner, I was so burnt out and so depleted that this little bit of help that he was giving me I felt like it was saving me so much, and I didn't have the capacity to leave and do it by myself. Eventually I was forced to, and then I allowed myself to be in victimhood because of it. And then, the next relationship, I was changing so much. I quit partying, I quit drinking for a while, and I did my yoga teacher training, I did my Reiki training, my somatic training. I was becoming this new person, and it wasn't fitting this old relationship that I had built. But I was starting over. Like, I left a career. I was so scared. I didn't have like money saved up to go out on my own. I was just winging it. And at one point I was working for my partner as well. So I was like, my safety was so tied in with him. He lived with me, and I got rid of my roommate. And so I was really relying on this other person. And again, this is why it comes back to self-trust for me. In those moments, I didn't have the self-trust that I felt like I could go and do it on my own. especially because I wasn't plumbing anymore and I felt like kind of like a baby. I was like, I've started this business and now I'm like a baby trying to make money and trying to make it work while desperately not wanting anything to do with plumbing again. And just like the thought of potentially having to go back was like, would make me so depressed because when I left my plumbing career, I literally felt like I was dying inside. And I was like, that is not an option. So my whole sense of safety was tied up with this person. And not to make it sound like there was no love there. There was so much love there, but there was all of these things going on in the background of my mind. I was like growing and changing, and I could feel that this person was like pulling me back and pulling me back and pulling me back. And then, he would try to grow and he would try to change, but it was still pulling me back. I didn't know how I was going to be able to afford my house without him. I didn't know what life was going to look like alone. I had this deep, deep, deep fear of being alone, and I didn't realize it until we separated. But I had all of this awareness that I needed to leave. And because it took me so long to do it, I held so much shame inside of me, and I isolated myself. I pushed people out of my life because it was so painful to have people reflect back what I knew deep inside. And so I isolated myself. And a lot of the shit that happened in my relationship was so bad that I I couldn't tell anyone about it because, again, I was like, I know what I think about this and I don't need to tell other people. They're just going to tell me what I already know, and then it's just going to be impossible for me to ignore, and I wasn't ready to take that step. And I think one of the most painful parts of being in a relationship with somebody who hurts you all the time is the self-abandonment in those moments where they do things that feel unforgivable and you allow them to just brush past it like nothing happened and you swallow it. That self-abandonment hurts more than anything in the world. And I am still working on like that self-forgiveness. And again, like I said, like that self-trust, because when you stay with somebody who hurts you like that, you your inner child is like, how could you do this to me? How are you not protecting me from this? So there's like so much inner turmoil and like friction and resistance going on inside. And it took me, I want to say, like a year and a half of doing a lot of healing work to finally be able to walk away and to leave. And I'm not saying that it necessarily has to take you that long. Like, if I could have worked with somebody doing the somatic work that I do now, or if I would have been able to hold space for myself the way that I can hold space for myself now, I think I would have had the capacity to leave a lot sooner. But I was so dysregulated in my nervous system that I still, even after quitting plumbing, I still felt the burnout from all those years. And I still felt all of the burnout from trying to build a business from this place of scarcity. And I was just still so dysregulated and disembodied, and I was having a hard time. And so for me to be able to walk away, it took an incredible amount of healing, an incredible amount of strength to start over with like nothing, and to trust that the chips would fall into place as they were meant to if I did what I knew I needed to do. And so, yeah, I did so much work with the self-love. I made choices for myself that were difficult but good for me, and I started small and I built up from there, and then eventually I had the capacity to walk away and leave, and it wasn't easy at all. Because now, for the first time in my life where I wasn't partying after going through a breakup, I was faced with all of these feelings. Not only the detox from being in attachment with somebody with such an intense, like, love and relationship that we had. And I talked about this at the beginning and I barely even got into it at all. But like the whole twin flame journey, like I do believe this person was my twin flame because he triggered such a deep awakening in me. And while I was with him, the things that I went through because of the relationship pushed me and activated me to change. It was like that pivot moment. Those pivot moments for me were all during this relationship where I finally changed my life and then grew from there. And during the relationship, we had so many times where I did try to walk away and I did break up with him. And then I always would get pulled back in. And there was so much shame in that part alone as well, because it was like I would tell people that we're broken up and then within a week we'd be back together. And it just completely broke down my level of self-trust because it was like, okay, you know better, like break up with him. And then I'd be like, I'm good, like I'm single, I'm gonna be okay. And then I would get back together with him. So it was like I was abandoning myself again every single time. And I felt so powerless to this. Like I cannot explain to you how powerless I felt to this cycle of starting and stopping over and over and over and over again. I literally felt like I was on a fucking merry-go-round and I couldn't get off. And I literally remember saying that to myself so many times. It feels like I'm on a merry-go-round and I can't get off. And then like the shame, it just keeps building. And then I'd isolate myself even more. And I want to say like barely had any friends by the end of this relationship. I kept everybody at like arm's length and I desired and craved community and sisterhood so much. And it wasn't until after my relationship ended that I was finally able to let people get closer to me. But that push and pull dynamic creates such a strong attachment. And not only that, but like when it breaks down your self-trust, it's like you just feel even more powerless because you're like, well, here we go again. And that was really, really hard and really painful. And a lot of my deepest wounds were activated in this relationship. I was very anxiously attached. He was very avoidant and he would kind of abandon me in any sort of conflict. And I can't even describe to you like the amount of pain that brought to me. I felt like I'd never felt that kind of pain before. I think I'd felt it quite a bit in like the last relationship, but it was happening so much in this relationship. We'd have like these seasons where things would be really good at the start and then he would completely like back off and like put up a wall. And then I would then try to, reconnect and I would try desperately to like get through to him. But it's like the more that I would try to get through to him, the more he would push me away. And then we would fight and then he would disappear, whether it was like work or he would just leave. And I wouldn't know like what was happening and he wouldn't pick up the phone. And I could text him or call him like a million times and he would just completely ignore me. And I would go into this state of like sheer panic. Like I would just loop in my nervous system. Like it was like panic attack. And he could never understand that. Like I explained it to him so many times and he just never seemed to understand it. And so, having shared this with him and then him continuing to behave this way made me feel even more abandoned because it was like, how can you know that I feel like this and still choose to like abandon me in those moments? I didn't really realize it that he was probably feeling the same way that I was. And the only way for him to feel better was to create that space. But for me, the only thing that would make me feel better was to be in connection again. And over time in the relationship, the nervous system dysregulation that I was feeling in my body started to compound more and more and more because there was sometimes days at a time where there would be very little communication or like no attempt at like reconnection. And so I would spend that whole time in a complete state of shutdown. So what happened is that fight energy got activated in me so much in those moments of conflict that eventually in those moments I would completely shut down and disassociate, and I wouldn't be able to do anything for days. I got to the point where I felt like I was just moving through life like a zombie a lot of the time. And then the longer that I stayed in this relationship, the more quickly my nervous system would start to react in this freeze state. And it got so frustrating for me because it was like I felt powerless and in my own body. I felt like I couldn't live my life. I couldn't go and do my own thing and like, create that space that I needed for myself in the relationship. Like there was I was just completely powerless. And so 2025 for me, my word of the year was power. And when I pulled that card at the beginning of the year, I had no idea the journey that I was going to go through to reclaim my power and what that meant. And that meant walking away from that relationship and starting over on my own again. I think that when you're in a relationship like that too, all of these things compound over time and it somehow turns into your new normal. And you don't even realize how toxic and how unhealthy it is. Like, of course you do on a certain level, but you don't see it in the same way as you do like having that space from it. And I remember thinking during that relationship, if only I could figure out how to regulate myself during a conflict so that this wouldn't happen anymore. So that, because when I would get triggered during a conflict, like I said, like my fight would come out, I would get very angry and very, like I would attack. That was like my way of protecting myself when I was hurt, was to like get angry and to attack. And to be honest, that's like a very normal reaction. It's a very normal protective reaction. But obviously it's not really healthy when it's expressed like that in the moment in conflict in any relationship. But I thought maybe if I could heal, maybe if I could change this, that our relationship could be fixed. I didn't realize that it was probably almost impossible for me to be able to find a way to regulate myself in those moments while I was in that relationship. I'm sure in my next relationship, this is going to be something that comes up for me again. But now I have created this deep sense of safety and regulation in my system as a baseline. This is my new baseline. So it's a lot easier for me to self-soothe in those moments of dysregulation than it was when I was constantly in those moments. Well, I must say, I didn't expect that I was going to get this deep, but I feel like it's important to share these aspects from a place of like integration and from a place of power. And so that's why I'm coming and sharing this now. Like it's been a really hard journey for me. Really, really hard. Like I said, like after the breakup, I felt like I was detoxing from literally a drug for those first few weeks. And I struggled with fully cutting him out of my life for quite a long time after we broke up. I had a couple of times of like moments of reconnection, some moments longer than I'd like to admit, but I know that it was all part of my journey. And I know that I'm going to continue to choose myself and to just find like true joy and happiness in being by myself. And one of the huge reasons why I was so scared to be alone, it was because I never truly built a life for myself that I actually loved. My life isn't perfect right now, and there's lots of things that I still want and desire, but I had to learn to start filling my life up with things that make me feel happy and things that make me feel fulfilled, and also learn how to truly enjoy being by myself. But I also really want to say too that this is so important because I actually am somebody who does not thrive being alone all the time. So a big part of my healing journey has been finding that balance between being able to spend time by myself and being happy, and then also making sure that I stay connected to the people in my life on a regular basis so I don't shrivel up and die. So my social battery can still continue to be filled in the way that feels good for me. So it's like finding what I truly need and finding what I truly want, but also really shifting my perspective. Like there was so many months over the winter where I was so miserable and I was like kind of in this rut of kind of like feeling sorry for myself. And I almost had this feeling again where it was like I was waiting for something or someone to save me. Like I was waiting for the weather to shift so that I could feel happy again. I was waiting for someone to maybe come into my life to help me find balance again, because I struggle to find balance sometimes between, like I said, like being alone and being out in the world, and I was just struggling to find my happiness. And I realized when I was looking back at my life, pre this last relationship, how miserable I was and how dysregulated I was and how anxious and depressed and so focused on how much my life sucked. And it made me realize like my life feels like kind of boring right now, but it feels boring in this way where it's like I finally feel peaceful, and I've never felt like that before. So even though maybe I don't have as much community in my life as I want, and maybe I still do desire to have a partner in my life, I realized that like I had this beautiful opportunity to really enjoy my life at this phase right now. And when I thought about how much peace I feel in my body compared to how much anxiety I used to have, I was like, I'm so fucking lucky. Like I used to wake up and feel like I was going to die because my anxiety was so bad. And now I wake up and I feel peace in my body. And I feel like after really taking the time to embody this peace, I feel like as I learn to embody more of the self-trust as well, the joy starts to come in. So like not only am I feeling peace, but I'm feeling joy as well on a more regular basis in like the little things. And I made a little post on my Instagram story today. It was like just a picture of a blossom, like the first flower blossom that I've seen this spring in the woods. And I was at a workshop this morning with my mentor, and she said something that she says all the fucking time. And for some reason, I just landed different today. And it was like, fall in love with the mundane. And I always used to think when she said that, it was like, fall in love with like the boring things that like you do to make you feel good. But I was like, oh no, it's about so much more than that. It's about falling in love with the little moments. So like my life is so simple right now and there's no chaos or like excitement like there used to be. But now it's like my eyes are opened to all of the little things that like make me happy. Like the smell of the forest after it rains, or like a new blossom in the forest, or the way that the wind feels like refreshing on my cheeks, or sitting and drinking my tea while looking out where I live at the property and watching the dogs play and feeling that like gratitude and that happiness in my heart. And that's when I realized like fall in love with the mundane doesn't mean, fall in love with like the boring shit in your life. It means learn to find joy and beauty in all of the simple little moments. And then you don't feel like you have to seek all of these big dopamine hits all the time because you're finding all this joy in all the little things. And it's 12:22 right now. That's my number that I always see. So I'll leave that there for anybody else who needed that number, or maybe even just a 222. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for being here and listening and, essentially like holding the space for me to share in this way. I think I've really avoided this topic for a very long time because, like I said, I was very much like in it still and do hold a lot of shame about it. And it feels really hard for me to share about my relationships and the toxicity and the drama and the disempowerment that I held. But I also know that there's probably so many of you out there that have experienced this as well and will probably feel very seen by me sharing this. So it would be a shame if I kept this to myself and didn't share this part of my life. It still feels painful to look back on some of these times, and I still feel a lot of sadness and a lot of grief for that version of me who just so desperately wanted to be loved. But I also feel so much pride and appreciation for all of the things that she did to get me to where I am now. And I also know that all of these really difficult things that I went through in my life, I went through them so that I could now help other people go through similar things. And with my experience in somatics, be able to guide them through it and help them change so much faster than I was able to. So I probably spent 15 years chasing love that was never really going to love me back in the ways that I needed them to. So anyways, again, thank you for listening. If my story resonated with you, please reach out to me, chat with me. If you are going through something similar in your life and you would like help doing the healing work so that you can leave and you can create a better life for yourself, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I do hold space for women one-to-one doing my somatic work. And honestly, like I just am so excited that I get to share this work with people because unlike so many other modalities, somatic work is an opportunity for you to be present with yourself, to meet yourself on a deeper level than you ever have, and to see your patterns and to grow and to heal and to learn how to feel all the things that you actually truly want to feel and how to create the life that you truly want to create. So if you are interested in working with me one-on-one, please reach out to me. If you would just like to chat about how much this resonated with you, again, reach out to me, comment, DM, email, any of the things. I hope everybody has an amazing day, and I will see you guys next week.